So England won, we topped the group, we're unbeaten, and we're through to the next round. So it's fantastic to be an England fan, right?
Oh my God, we're
Foden
so
needs to play in number
boring.
10.
Play attacking football. Oh my God, I got shot. Okay. Oh no. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is The Steak Bake, and today we're going to be discussing England's performance against Slovenia in a 0-0 draw in the final group game of Euro 2024. First, we'll start with the headlines, and England are through, top of the group, completely unbeaten, and with 2 clean sheets out of 3, England are through to the next round in first place. Obviously, that isn't the whole story here. We have a lot of fan outrage from the way England are playing. England haven't really scored many goals or even created many chances, and there's a lot of buzz around what Gareth Southgate should be doing with his team and how England can do better in this tournament. Firstly, I think it's really important to point out that I'm not going to sit here and just obliterate and bash Gareth Southgate and England. I'm going to try and perform a more helpful view, a more middle of the ground sort of view, a more glass half full than glass half empty kind of view of the game and of England as a whole. I'm equally not going to sit here and say England are unbelievable and we should all get behind England all the time because it's amazing football, because it's definitely not. I'm just going to try and be more realistic about my opinions. If you want something hardcore Gareth Southgate out, there's a lot of that around. If you want something really positive, I can't provide that when England aren't playing particularly positively, and I don't think there is anyone sat here being like, oh, England were amazing yesterday. I don't think that opinion exists, so if you're looking for that, yeah, why? So we'll start with England's setup, and it is, of course, very negative. It is, of course, very safe. A lot of backwards passing, a lot of passing it around the edge of the box from one side to the other, starting with the right winger. The right winger gets the ball. There's no chance of a cross. So they play it back to Kyle Walker at right back. He plays it across to Declan Rice. Declan Rice plays it across to Trippier. Trippier plays it to Foden. And then it goes back again over and over and over again. That's very boring. It's very safe. It's very England. This is how we were always going to play. And I think one of the things I'm most surprised about the response on Twitter, the response from the pundits, and the feedback that England are getting in general with so much hatred is that everyone seems surprised that we're not utilizing this attacking talent that we've suddenly got. We're not using it in the right way. Everyone seems surprised that Gareth Southgate hasn't changed his style of play. I think everyone seems a little bit surprised that we're not suddenly this amazing attacking side. And the reason for that is Gareth was never going to change. This was always going to be the way he played from minute one of this tournament. The qualifiers, you just watched some of the games beforehand, the build up to this tournament, the qualifiers that we've played for other tournaments up until this point, they've always been this style of play right back until the 2018 World Cup, really. Certainly group stage qualifying and certainly qualifying have been this negative Nelly style of football, and this safe, boring style of football. It's not changed for a long time, and I think perhaps people aren't watching England in the qualifiers, and I completely understand if your only experience of watching England is to watch them in tournaments, then you're going to be pretty shocked by how bad we are when it comes to attacking football. But if you watch the qualifiers and if you've watched the friendlies, then you can't be surprised by this, surely. This is exactly how we've been playing for Gareth Southgate's whole tenure, and managers before him as well, let me add. This isn't just a Gareth Southgate problem. Personally, I think it's a little bit of an FA problem. I think the FA have got this idea of safe possession-based football, and Gareth Southgate was very much hired as a yes man to say yes to the FA, but that's a completely different issue and video. Let's talk about what England are doing right now, and it's just what we've been doing the whole time. Every single tournament so far that Gareth Southgate has taken, is certainly the last 2. We've been on 4 points after 2 games, and we've topped the group each time. We've then got reasonably far in the tournament. You have to say, this boring style of football does work in tournament football to an extent. Obviously, we've still not won anything since 1966, and although we've come much, much closer getting to finals and semi-finals under Gareth Southgate It hasn't brought us full success, but it's definitely winning us more games and stopping us losing more games. So it is technically working. And if you look at the managerial statistics and things like that, Gareth Southgate is the most successful England manager since the 1966 squad. Men's side, obviously, because the women's game has been absolutely fantastic over the last 10 years. The England men's side hails in comparison to them, unfortunately. However, Gareth Southgate has been a successful manager for England. The fact that we are going further in tournaments is a positive, and it is this style of football that gets you there, certainly out of the group stage. I'd like to see much more attacking when we get out of the group stage, but group stage football looks like this, unfortunately, and I think it will continue to do so. That being said, it is diabolically boring to watch, and I think there is certainly a case for saying at the end of this tournament we let Gareth Southgate step aside. I think he should step back after this tournament regardless of what happens in it, because I think England fans are at this stage now, we are pretty fed up with this boring, slow style of football, and I would like to see the generation of this kind of golden generation that we've got coming through with Palmer, with Foden, with Bellingham, with Gordon. I would like to see that utilised in a way that shows much more fun, attacking, aggressive football that allows them to show how good they really are and allows them to thrive in an international scene that perhaps is lacking that. And I certainly think that's the case if you look through all of international football as well, certainly some of the bigger sides. There are exceptions, of course, but France in particular, if you look at France, watching them throughout the group stage so far, they've been very similar to England, in my opinion. Very slow, very boring, not really doing anything too much good, but equally not doing too much bad either. Just kind of creating those half chances. The difference between England and France is that there is an outball for France. France have runners in behind. France have players that can create something a little bit better than England's front three or front four right now. Mbappe being a key component of that for sure. And certainly his pace is something that England don't really have. Like, Saka's reasonably quick, but balls over the top, it's really obvious. If our only ball over the top is to Saka, they just mark it or they play him offside. Like, it's pretty simple. But if you have a runner on the other side as well, or every now and again Kane runs in behind, or every now and again Jude runs in behind, it just stretches the defence a little bit more. And that's something that France do that England don't, that has made them look better within this tournament. But one of the things I would like to point out is that France do look equally poor, and it's because they have the same attitude of group stages in that they just want to get through them. They don't want to lose. Let's go in and be relatively meh, and then we'll see what happens when it gets to the knockouts. I imagine France will kick on and try a lot harder, which I don't imagine England will do. I imagine England will continue this vein of slow boringness, which is a shame, but I think that's what will happen. So if England's system is working exactly as England expected and exactly as England are setting up, then why aren't England beating teams such as Slovenia? I'm going to give England a little bit of defence to start with, which is that Slovenia did play for the draw. They put a lot of men behind the ball. They didn't really challenge Pickford in the goal at all, apart from the odd ball over the top where Gueye or Stones let it bounce, and then there was a little bit of errors at the back that caused an issue. But apart from that, Slovenia didn't really threaten. They had a moment of high possession at the end of the first half where they did pretty much what England did and passed it around the edge of the box and never really got a decent shot away or a decent chance. Slovenia, at the end of the day, they got to half-time and they thought, you know what, 0-0's enough for us to get through. We can get through here without really trying too hard. And I think they put everyone behind the ball, and that is one of the reasons why England found it very difficult to get those balls into the box that we pretty much play for. England rely on the other team going for it a little bit with their style of football, in the same way that City do. A lot of teams that come and play Manchester City and just kind of sit back and do nothing, it takes a long time for City to break that team down. The same thing is with England. England have the quality to break teams down, but we're too patient and too slow, and it doesn't really work. So Slovenia, once they sat back, were pretty much guaranteed the 0-0, let's be honest. If they weren't challenging our goal, England were pushed right up into their half, and we just kind of camped outside their box pretty much. But equally, that's not the only reason why England didn't win that game, of course. Now that the excuses are out the way of England's setup being boring and also Slovenia defending, there's obviously wider issues in this team that would suggest that England need to do a lot more. One of those things is that we have not scored many goals at this tournament, 2 out of a possible 3 games. That's not good enough when you've got Harry Kane in your team, when you've got Phil Foden, when you've got Bellingham, when you've got Saka. All of these players, 165 goal contributions between them in their respective clubs this season. That's a lot of firepower that we're not getting the best out of, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is the one that I've already mentioned, in that there's no balls over the top, there's no runs in behind that mean that the defenses are not split and they're not creating space enough for the midfielders by doing so. Basically, when you put balls in behind, that stretches the middle of the park so that there's more space for your midfielders. And equally, if the ball reaches the person that you're sending in behind, you get an opportunity. If it doesn't, then you've at least gained some yards. You've stretched the midfield. You get more space for Declan Rice. You get more space for Jude Bellingham, Phil Foden when he cuts in from the side. Everyone gets more opportunity to play their style of football when you push a team and stretch a team in the way that runners in behind does. Having just Saka do that will not work. It will not, because all the team has to do is quell that Saka threat, and then that's pretty much them done for the game. And that's pretty much what Slovenia did. Their left back, who was on Saka, basically rolled around on the floor and cried every time he was touched, won a lot of free kicks, looked very easily beaten, but then played on the referee to try and win as much as he possibly could, and dealt with Saka. And once he dealt with Saka by doubling and tripling up with his fellow defenders and midfielders, England's threat was completely nullified, really. We didn't really have anything to stretch the defence, and therefore we ended up with this passing it round the back, passing it round the sides sort of play that we're so often seeing with England. And it's because we can just isolate the one threat, and once that threat is done, England don't have anything, unfortunately. Of course, there's always magical moments from Foden or Kane or someone to just shoot from 25 yards or something like that. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold had one that fizzed over the bar. I think there was a couple that just kind of didn't really get much venom behind them, but if they had, it would have been an opportunity. But apart from those fleeting opportunities, England don't really create enough, and a lot of that reason is the additional runners in behind. A lot of that is Kane pushing a little bit too far back to support the midfield. That doesn't really work in this England setup where we've only got one outlet in Saka. And I think there's a simple solution here, and I think the solution is someone like Anthony Gordon. He only came on for 5 minutes at the end of the game. I think he came on in the 88th minute, which of course is not enough time for him to get going. But straight away he beat the man and ran down the touchline. Admittedly, he ran out for a throw. But then the next touch the ball he had was a cutting 25-yard through ball that landed at Kane's feet, and England had an opportunity. Straight away, there's bright sparks looking up, trying to find England that opportunity going forward. And I think getting Gordon into the team is really important. And I think, unfortunately, it's at the sacrifice of Phil Foden. A lot of people have been calling for Phil Foden to be playing in that number 10 role, but he was. For a lot of that second half, certainly from half-time up until around about the 75th minute, and then perhaps a little bit on before he was then substituted off, Phil Foden was playing in the number 10. Jude Bellingham has been pushed out to that left-hand side. Foden was given much more freedom. He was allowed to move from left to right, but predominantly he was taking up that number 10 role. And let's be honest, he didn't really do that much in that role. He didn't shine in the way that I think a lot of people thought that he would. And with him being unable to shine in that 10 position, I think it kind of suggests that Jude Bellingham should stay there. I think he is someone who is causing a threat from that number 10 and did do. Certainly in the first game, Jude Bellingham was easily the best player on the pitch. And I think it's really important that we don't lose Jude at the expense of Phil Foden. And unfortunately, that does mean that Phil Foden has to come out of the squad now, in my opinion. Certainly for at least a half. Gordon needs a good run in this team. Gordon needs to play on that left side. Stick to the wing, stick to the touchline, run in behind, and then cut inside closer to the touchline. But he needs to stretch defences, and I think that's the way we get the best out of this team. And I think, unfortunately, it is Phil Foden that has to come out for this to happen, really. Some people will be saying that Jude Bellingham should drop into the holding midfield role alongside Declan Rice, and Foden should go ahead of him. And I do see where you're coming from in that kind of position. Jude's a very physical, 6'2" odd footballer. He puts himself in the way of the ball. He shields well. he gets the ball, he gets it moving, he can do that kind of defensive role position, but it's certainly not the role that he is used to at Real Madrid. He's almost a striker at Real Madrid. He's playing in that almost false 9 role where he gets into the area rather late in that from the number 10 position, which is where he's being set up. And I think he's much more familiar in that attacking role now. Jude Bellingham, for me, is an attacking midfielder. And I think, to be fair, the holding midfield issue was kind of solved. Not solved entirely. I don't think it was an unbelievable performance by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the decision to bring in Kobbie Mainoo for the second half was the right one for Gareth Southgate. And I think that he showed himself that he is that Calvin Phillips player that Gareth Southgate has been wanting. That kind of player who is technically a physical defensive midfielder, but is more than happy to play a 1-2 or pass the ball into Saka and give him support and then play on the edge of the penalty area a little bit more. And Mainoo definitely showed that he was able to do that in his role yesterday. He showed a bit of impetus, a bit of thought. He wanted to prove himself. You could kind of tell that he thought he could do that role and was given the chance by Southgate. And he's like, I am taking this opportunity. And he put himself about, played some good passes, got forward, moved England forward, stretched the defence a little bit. And I certainly think that Kobbie Mainoo is the right choice in that holding midfield position alongside Declan Rice. I think he offers almost exactly the same kind of role that Gareth was playing Calvin Phillips in that 2018 World Cup when he was allowed to go a little bit further forward. And I think that's what Gareth means when he says we're missing that Calvin Phillips role, is what he means is a defensive midfielder that's quite happy to go forward, much like Declan Rice does. I think that if you use someone like Gallagher naturally for Chelsea will go forward, but for England, he's very much a physical, put himself about midfielder, cat amongst the pigeons is how I've described him so far this tournament, and he couldn't really thrive in that holding midfield position. And the same with Trent Alexander-Arnold. He looked much brighter when he was on at right back yesterday. But Kobbie Mainoo, I think, has solidified himself onto that starting team sheet for me. And I think with Jude Bellingham ahead of him, that brings quite a strong midfield to the centre of the park. It's certainly 3 names that I would be very happy to see on the team sheet: Mainoo, Rice and Bellingham in that cluster in the middle of the park. I think that's the right way of going about it. But England still need that runner in behind, and that runner in behind is Gordon, and that's how I would change the lineup for the next match. I think I'd then bring on Phil Foden on the 60th minute or whatever for Jude Bellingham, who probably is getting tired, and then you've got this world-class threat central attacking midfielder who's going to really cause some defensive issues if you're chasing a game, or if you're not chasing a game. Phil Foden's one of the biggest runners in the tournament. He's going to run more than anyone else. He's extra energy, extra legs. You can't really turn that down when you're chasing a game or when you're holding a lead or whatever. He'll be really important coming off the bench. And I think that's how the tournament needs to run for now, is we need to be a lot more sensible about the way the team is picked. It needs to be thought out of who matches who and who plays better with who, rather than having this age-old England problem of shoehorning quality players into a system, because that's what's kind of happening. It's what's happened before. You look at Lampard, Gerrard, Scholes trying to play in the same team and they couldn't. You ended up with Lampard playing left mid at certain stages of England, and that can't happen again. We can't make the same mistakes again. We need to stop making these mistakes of shoehorning players in. It's much more important that we get the best out of the ones that are on the field and play complementary players for the system and for each other. And I think that's how you do it. Kobbie Mainoo, Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham ahead of them, Gordon out on the left, although your left, sorry, Saka out on the other side, and Kane through the middle. I think that's how we're going to get the best out of this team, certainly in the system that we're playing. One player I thought that did reasonably well when they came on as well was Cole Palmer. He straight away started to fill in that Saka role of coming off the right-hand side, cutting across the edge of the penalty area laterally, seeing if he could get that shot away, seeing if he could pass the ball through in a neat way. And straight away, he looked like a little bit of a threat. He was happier to put crosses in, certainly much more happier than Saka had been to. Saka tends to get the ball on his left foot and then lay it back to the right back, whereas Cole Palmer was quite happy to whip it in left-footed and in-swing it towards the goal, and created a couple of sort of, not even half chances, quarter chances for England doing that. And I think it's encouraging to see. I would still probably have him as first reserve. I'd still have him not starting personally. I'd have him coming on for Saka to give a little bit more run at that left back who obviously handled Saka for the whole game, but they're very similar players. There is the opportunity with Cole Palmer that he's left-footed, so you could play him on the left-hand side, and then you have left-footed players on the left side, which is beneficial more as a winger rather than an inside forward as he plays for Chelsea and as he prefers to play. And he certainly could do that, but I think understudy for Saka fits him very well. And I think if Gordon was on that side, I'd want to keep Gordon going, because obviously if Cole Palmer finds one of those balls all the way over the top to Gordon lurking at the back post, then you never know. We could create opportunities from that. And I think England will create more opportunities going through those kind of motions and setting up in that way, having Foden off the bench, having Cole Palmer off the bench. I think that certainly allows our last 30 minutes, 20 minutes of the game to be really effective as well and create more chances for England when we're chasing a match. And I think that's overall how I would set up in this system anyway, how I would set up this team. I think it is the best way of getting the most out of these players. And I think it's giving opportunities to players that perhaps deserve it, and it's taking out players that are pretty much the same player. Like having Foden and Bellingham in the middle together doesn't really work in this system. You either lose one of them and gain the other, or you tend to lose both of them because they're not playing in the same way. And not shoehorning players into positions is really important for the rest of this tournament and the success of this team. So those are the changes that I think need to be done to the England team to change it positively going forward. It certainly wasn't a good performance from England yesterday in the way that we were expecting. England certainly could have done a lot more going forward and made a lot more opportunities and looked a lot more positive. And I completely understand the point of view of England being very poor. However, personally, this is what I was expecting. If I'm totally honest, I'm not surprised by what's happening, as I've mentioned, but I completely understand the criticism that's coming through. I personally don't get the whole sack Gareth in the middle of the tournament kind of stuff. That seems a bit silly, but I do think he should probably step aside at the end of this tournament, and hopefully if he makes these changes, he can step aside positively as someone that's taken England really far and taken them further than most managers have done so before him. And we can look back in a few years' time, once our anger has settled down, look back on Gareth's tenure and say, you know what, that was a pretty good time for England as a football team. And it built us up for all the World Cups that we've won since then. Hopefully we can do that. But Gareth certainly needs to make more changes, and England certainly need to do much better for the rest of this tournament. So that is everything I've got to say about England. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy the video, please go down and leave a like and a subscription if you're not subscribed already. I would greatly appreciate that. Also, make sure you drop some comments, throw what your England lineup would be going into the next game, the kind of changes that you would make, whether you think that certain things worked, whether you think the Kobe Manu was a good move, whether you think switching Kyle Walker and Trent Alexander-Arnold round was an interesting move. I certainly thought that was interesting. Not long enough for me to be able to comment on it, really. I'd like to see longer of that situation, but we move. Maybe we'll see it in the knockout stages. But yeah, please leave your comments. Make sure you tell me what you think England should be doing next. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video. And remember, come on England, and be kind to one another. See you later.